Well, you can definitely tell fall is here for good. In fact, old man winter can't be far behind. Welcome back to the channel, FlatsClass YouTube, and what do I have for you today? Well, it's one of those bait videos. It's going to be the top 5 inshore baits for November. Let's walk out here to the boats and let me pull a few out of the bag here, out of the BUZBE bag, show you what I'm talking about. I think you're going to be surprised on one of them. I'm going to start with that one. I'm going to give you the juice first. All right, I got all the gear scattered all over the Hell's Bay Marquesa here. This is not my boat. This is actually Captain Al Keller's boat, and we've got the Hell's Bay Owners Tournament that's happening right here at the Plantation Inn in Crystal River this weekend. So I had his boat for a recent shoot that we did with Captain J.C. Livingston on some grouper, and if you haven't seen the video for grouper tackle, my guys will put it a link in it below for you guys to go check out. All right, I love doing these inshore monthly bait deals because it puts you on the right path. Now, you don't necessarily have to use everything I'm telling to use, but I like to give you the technique, if nothing else. And then whatever your favorite bait is, brand, whatnot, you can just kind of run a parallel to it and probably be pretty successful. The first one, though, is, in my opinion, bait specific. It is the heavy dean. So I use a little technique that I borrowed from some of my bass buddies, and it's almost like a spy bait technique. And what you do is you don't give that mirror dean that normal action, that flash, 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 like a butterfly. You basically just straight reel it through the water. That's it. So instead of using the standard MR17, you're going to use an MR18, the heavy dean. Let me put my glasses on here and I'll show you how you can tell. Most of the heavy deans will have it noted right on the bait. It comes in a wide array of colors, just like the MR17, but not as many. I just happened to pick the 26 color because I had it on hand there in the shop. Now, the trick to this is how you work it, because you don't work it. The MR18 heavy dean falls twice as fast as the standard mirror dean. You can make a nice long cast now because it is heavier. You're going to cast farther. You can cast a lot smoother through the wind, and then you don't get that big parabolic curve of line out there, so it straightens out fairly quick. Now, because I'm a bait caster guy, I throw this on a bait casting rod the most, and I don't even throw it on braid. I throw it on fluorocarbon or mono. You're like, why do you do that? Well, I want it to be one of those baits I can reel slow, just pull it through the water. And then if it touches something like a little grass stalk, I can snap it real quick and it'll flash off, and then I can just keep on rolling it. Now, because of its deeper profile, when it comes through the water, it does roll through the water. The heavy dean keeps it down. See, a normal MR17 would actually pull up closer to the surface. So the heavy is the right one to use. Now, I fish this in 2 foot to 4 foot of water most of the time, and I'm fishing it on 14 and 16 pound fluorocarbon line. Now, I use a very slow gear ratio. I'm using 6.3. That way I don't have to be conscious of how slow I'm reeling. I would recommend do not use anything over 7.1. That's what I would recommend. Because at 7.1, you're gonna have to slow yourself down quite a bit. You're saying, well, what if I'm a spinning rod guy? Okay, spinning rod guy. Spinning rod guy, you're just gonna utilize a much smaller reel setup, like a 2000. This is a 2000 size. You're going to use a 2000 size, and then you're probably going to have 8-pound braid with a very long leader. What's very long? 6 to 8 feet long, which means you're going to have to tie a small connection knot. Now, if you want to be super slick, you're probably going to use monofilament. 6-pound monofilament, 8-pound monofilament, and then tie on a short section of fluorocarbon. That's it. What rod am I going to throw it on? My bait casting rod, I'm going to throw 7-foot, probably medium action. That's what this is, with a fast tip. If I'm going to work it with a spinning rod, still probably going to be a 7 to 7.5 foot rod, medium, and I'm going to say fast. Now, in the Terramar Double X series from Shimano, the fast still bends pretty deep in the blank, okay? So if you're throwing a rod that has a lot stiffer action where it just bends up here, you might have to go to a moderate fast tip. But medium action is the right action because that allows you to cast this a great distance, because it's kind of a power finesse technique. Now let's talk about bait number 2. Bait number 2. Bait number 2 is a scented 4-inch jerk shad. Now, I'm going to be a little self-serving and tell you about the Beer Run, which is just one of those good croaker pinfish colors. And this is the month that the water will chill enough to start getting rid of this this croaker and pinfish in most areas. Not all areas, but in a lot of areas you won't see them in the shallows as much. But redfish and trout are still vulnerable to this bait. So what I like to do is I like to pick a 1/16 ounce. If I'm fishing a little deeper, I'll use an 1/8 ounce. Now I'm going to use the Trout Eye, which is one of those, lifelike type jig heads with that 3D eye, but it's got a nice stout hook on it. And when I put it in this bait and work it, it's a head weighted bait now instead of working on it as a Texas rig with a belly weight, like a rigging hook. Instead of getting that side to side action, now I have a head first action. So it has a darting action that is going down to the bottom. Now I fish this quite a bit in potholes. This swashes around oyster bars and mangrove islands. And even if I'm fishing residential canals or ICWs, I can be patient and I can make a cast, whether it's, shallow water, 16th head, 8 ounce head if I'm a little bit deeper, and let it get down. The cool thing about this bait is when you have it rigged head first on a jig head, is when it gets down to the bottom, because this material, this ElasTech material that is proprietary to Z-Man, is so buoyant, the bait will stand up like this. So if you're used to using a plastisol bait from a different company, I'm not going to pick on any of them, but the bait will go down on the bottom and it'll just roll over. It'll just lay there on the bottom, do nothing, and then you give it action by bumping it around, and then it lays down again. Z-Man ElasTech, it goes down on the bottom and it's going to stand like that, and it's just going to have that kind of action. And then you can bump it around and it's still going to stand up. You can pop it real high like a shrimp and it's still going to stand up when it comes down, and it's going to fall slower. And like I said originally, it is scented. Now, if you want to have added scent, all you have to do is when you buy a bag of these, put 1 drop of Procure scent in here. Menhaden, mullet, pinfish, whatever you're trying to imitate, and then just move the bait around in it, and it will just stay in there with extra scent, and they'll be even more effective. All right, that was the second bait. Let's talk about bait number 3. Bait number 3. Here's what, I'm going to stay on the same theme. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, this is the Z-Man 3-inch minnow. Now, the 3-inch minnow is one of those baits that seems like it finds its way into everybody's tackle bag. I mean, everybody's tackle bag. But this time of year, when you reach November with chilly temperatures, and you just heard me talk about with bait 2 how a lot of those bait fish patterns will start to go away in some areas. That's where these darker colors like avocado, the right stuff, I'm calling the colors out at Z-Man because that's who I'm partnered with, root beer gold, those types of colors, calico candy, new penny, are very earthy and they blend into the bottom a little bit better. I utilize this, and this is a keel weighted, this is on a chin locks hook because I don't have any of the ZWGs yet from Z-Man that just came out. But this is a 2/0, 1/8 of an ounce, and on the 3-inch that gets it down there fairly quickly, in that when I'm fishing 1.5 feet to 3 feet of water, not much deeper than that. I would go to the jerk shed after that. But 1.5 feet to 3 feet of water, I'm using this quite a bit. You can cover a little bit more water, and on those cold days, you can roll this slow. Now, one of the secondary advantages to Z-Man Elastec is it's soft. Not only is it buoyant, it's soft and it's tough. The only kryptonite it knows is the southern pufferfish, or the smooth pufferfish. But because it's soft and it's not like a competitor's bait, so if you're using a plastisol bait, you know this, when that water temperature really gets chilly, gets down in those 50-degree temps, you got to reel the bait fast to get the tail to move. Well, with this one, you don't. You barely have to reel and that tail is moving the whole time. So you can use it, again, as a power finesse style bait, or because it's Texas rigged, and you've noticed there's 2 little fins on the back of this where I can bury that hook in there, kind of Tex pose it, that means skin the hook point. I can reel it through those soft grass points that you see, those bright green points in marsh areas that I like to fish in the Big Bend area of Florida and here on Florida's Nature Coast. So I can fish it in that stuff relatively trouble-free. Even in the kelpie stuff, the peppergrass and stuff that grows on the rocks, I can reel it through there, no problem. And when I'm targeting redfish, I use these darker colors in this 3-inch minnow size quite a bit. What do they mimic? Everything from crustaceans to the mud minnows that might live in those little creek environments. But whatever they mimic, they do a good job, because once November and December are here, this is a big go-to for me. Should be for you as well. Now you're going to have to use a medium with a fast tip or extra fast tip, not only to cast this, but to really, get a good hook set, because there's not a lot of hook gap in the way that I'm rigging this. It's necessary to do that. All right, one thing I forgot to mention with bait number 1 is when you tie that Mirrodine on, I looked at my notes when I was looking at this, make sure you put a clench knot on the connection, not a loop knot. You don't want this thing swimming around. You want a clench knot so it keeps it straight. All right, after that quick little review, let's go to bait number 4. What could it be? All right, bait number 4. Bait number 4 is really, we're going back to Snooktober again, because in the October top 5 inshore baits, we had this bait in there, and that is the topwater. Now, the topwaters that we talked about in the month of October were more like the Duke Dog, the Top Dog Junior, the Papa Mullet. And the Papa Mullet could still be a player for the trout in November. But what I like to do with topwater as that water chills is those days that are pre-front, where we have lots of overcast and we may have had a few days where things warmed up, I will throw some smaller topwaters. Namely, probably my first choice would be the Mirrolure XL. Those seem to do really well, and the Mirrolure itself, which is a little bit smaller. When I start throwing that Mirrolure, I start catching a lot of little mangrove snappers, and I'll even catch the occasional rogue pinfish that's still out there. But once I move up to the little bit bigger bait that has a little bit wider walk, it's okay. But because I still want to catch some of the snook that will be further in the back of the creeks, and on those warm-ups, they will attack a topwater. And you can throw a topwater all day long in November. The water is lower, so fish aren't up underneath the branches as much. You don't have as many or as high tides. And a lot of the fish get back there where there's a lot of small mullet and things like that in the far reaches of these creeks. So I'll use the top pup quite a bit, the Mirrolure XL, like I said, and the Mirrolure, which is the smaller version of this one. I'll keep my leaders still short because I want to give them plenty of action, but I just work them slower. Where I was coaching you in the past of working a little bit more erratic, stopping, reeling forward, then starting them up again. With these, I'm going to work a slow, rhythmic chop, 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 chop. And I'm going to catch my share of redfish because these are tighter walking baits. And I'm going to catch those bigger sow heavy trout that get further back in those creeks. And on the real warm-ups, or if I were fishing a little south of here, I know I would catch some snook as well. So topwater, still a play in November. Hate to take it out just because it's such an alpha bait. All right, number 5, it's going to be a sight fishing bait, I promise you. I have been in love with these baits ever since I met Heath at Bugs Fishing. And it's the closest thing as a light tackle nerd that gets you into fly fishing, because these beautifully hand-tied baits that he makes, and many of them are weedless, do such a good job faking out redfish and drum and flounder as well, by making themselves appear like shrimp and crabs. And he's got a couple of minnow patterns as well. But this is the little beastie bug, and this one worked really well last fall. And there's a few others that he has that I'll talk about as we get closer to winter time, some Ned bugs and things like that when it gets really cold. But this bait has so much action with these little rubber legs, and when it's wet and you're just barely kicking it, the legs just breathe like a crab backing up. So I'm utilizing this a lot around the swashes and the oyster bars once again, and definitely blind casting to potholes when I'm not sight fishing fish that I can see close. If I've got a little cloud cover or I've got glare on the water, but I can at least make out the lighter sand holes, I'm throwing it across to the far side of the sand hole and I'm just bumping it along. Most of the time, because of that spade head that it possesses and the way the line tie comes up at 45 degrees, I'm just pulling it along. So I'm fishing it on braid. I fish this on my casting rod quite a bit, a 6'9" or 6'8" casting rod, and I'm throwing it to these holes, and I'm kind of dragging it. Now the reel that I'm using for this is usually a 7.4. This is a Corrado DC, but I don't want to work it too fast, because you can reel it too fast where it's getting up off the bottom where it just doesn't look like a crab. So 7.4 moves fast enough, and what I'll do is I'll give it like 2 turns and move it like 4 or 5 feet, and then just let it set for a second, like a long second, not a New York second. I'm talking about, you know, a Crystal River second, which is really 3 seconds. So I let it sit and then I pull it again. I can't tell you how many times when I pause it and I start to reel it again, something hits it immediately as soon as I turn the handle, maybe not even one time. I'll get halfway through a turn and boom, something will punch it, because it heard it hit the water or it saw it coming across the bottom, and it gets up close to it. Now it's sitting still and it's just looking at it to see if it's alive, because it can see that rabbit fur just breathing. Then the next time I pull it, it just hits it. It's great for sight fishing because really the only thing that makes any noise is the head itself. So you can lead a fish you know, just a few feet, and then pull it to him and let it fall in front of him, and he'll usually grab it. It's got a really well-made hook on it. It's great sight fishing bait. But another, as you notice, there's a pattern that I've been following here for November. It's a power finesse style bait to put you in position to catch these fish, not only on the front and after the front, but you know, well before the front as well. All of these techniques and baits will catch fish. Now naturally, I use everything in my tackle bag, and I bring plenty in that BUZBE bag, but you can't bring the house, and I wanted to give you guys 5 hitters, you know, hammer shots that I knew were going to catch you fish. Speaking of that, if you enjoy this channel, really enjoy it, you're learning stuff and you're taking it in your boat, in your skiff, in your kayak, and going to the water and catching fish, push that subscription button. I need you guys here each and every week. Hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of these little tips. And remember, a lot of our television shows and all of our Tidewater Diaries live right here on FlatsClass YouTube. All right, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one, which will be tomorrow.